Okay, Tom, welcome to the Leading Edge as I'm my moniker for the IT Wire. I'm delighted to be able to speak to you today about the paper that you've published on the piece of work that you've done. Just like to kick off with a general exploration of the current state, if you will, of cybersecurity. It's a very hot topic here in Australia because of the episode at Medibank and a similar exercise, episode at Optus, which probably had played some part in the CEO at Optus losing her position. So it's a very pertinent topic for us to discuss. How do you see the domain at the moment, the threats that are emerging, how technology evolving, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. Well, first off, very much appreciate you having us on, Gareth. It's a pleasure is mine. We at Vector really appreciate being able to share our what we're seeing, our vision, how we're trying to tackle some of these problems with the audience, with IT Wire's audience. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah, and as far as what we're seeing in terms of the domain, as well as we follow this very closely within our customer environments. We have a lot of data to work with from that. We've got a managed detection service as well, that managed detection and response service that we're actively monitoring our customers' environments through. And so we see a lot of activity from that, but we're also following reports from some of our partner cybersecurity vendors. Sure. And we're closely in tune with all of this. And the consistent theme that we continue to see is just a hybrid nature of environments, and how attackers are starting to take advantage of that. And the thing that expressly stands out is very interesting to me is, in on-prem environments, like let's say in Windows Active Directory domains, for example, attackers have been in tune with the native capabilities available to them there for quite a while. And so they would leverage, those native capabilities to do things like reconnaissance and lateral movement, and generally persist in an environment, kind of under the radar for extended periods of time.
Sure.
Right? And with, the attack surfaces expanding to the cloud, we've got the identity cloud and cloud infrastructure and other such things. They're finding that
Sure.
Starting to realize that a lot of those native capabilities are available to them in different ways, different native capabilities that are available to them, but they can use them in the same sort of ways. And so we saw some recent attack scenarios where it started on-prem, but they leveraged the Okta agent in order to help them move to the identity cloud, and really just get a lot of information about the users within the environment, to move laterally to more privileged access within the environment, right? So that notion that this sort of hybrid attack surface of on-prem plus identity cloud plus infrastructure cloud, all of these different elements, they all have their own sort of control plane, so to speak, and they're really becoming adept at using that to not only pivot, but also once they've pivoted, let's say from on-prem into the cloud, then they're also using it to further extend their reach there.
Right.
And so
Okay.
We're sort of moving forward as a vendor with that context as kind of that's the primary, most difficult problem we think our customers are having to manage right now.
Right. So it's dealing with these various different environments, and malevolent actors, if you will. They're able to break into one and then move throughout the whole ecosystem, if you will, by leveraging on that weakness there. So how do you think that your particular solution best addresses those that your vision about the way in which the landscape is changing? How do you think you can best address that?
Yeah. So one of the things that's a challenge for all the organizations that are trying to defend against this kind of thing is there's a degree of maturity that comes to play here. One of the topics there is, lots of organizations are collecting the data that's
Yeah.
available to them from these, service providers. The problem is they're having a really difficult time deriving attack signal from it.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that we can, kind of create some leverage for them around.
Yeah.
So the in terms of how Vectra tackles that problem and how it's maybe different from what people are used to, there's traditional tooling that tends to focus on attacker tools and infrastructure. So they'll be looking
Right.
for maybe specific exploits taking place, or some known bad file being executed in the environment, something like that. Maybe some interaction with known bad infrastructure out on the internet. That's a lot
Right.
of the common techniques that detection tooling uses. And if you think about the notion of what we were just talking about, sort of these native capabilities, a lot of that tools and infrastructure oriented detection technique is not effective when somebody's operating in a live off the land sort
Oh
of
yeah,
manner.
yeah, for sure. So what you're trying to do is identify. I was looking at the paper. I haven't had a look at a hex dump for quite a few years, but it's a very highly technical thing. And
Yeah.
so you're trying to really understand, I guess, what in some sense, an undifferentiated stream of bytes, whether that represents an attack or whether it's a benign, bytes.
Yes.
How do you detect the patterns that exist within those agents, as it were? It's
Yeah, so that's a great kind of segue to come back to the report that is sort of
yeah,
the core of this conversation, right? Is we're not necessarily looking for the exploit in of itself within the Vectra platform. So that report actually served as sort of a good demonstration of how kind of traditional attack detection techniques are very challenging to get right.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the team at Proofpoint that puts out that emerging threats rule set, they put a lot. This is not intended to disparage them in any way whatsoever. Like,
no,
they
for
put a
sure.
lot of effort into making sure that they get those rules right. And it just so happens that it's a very, very difficult thing to be. It's as a security practitioner, I expect those rules that I'm implementing to be effective, but I
Yeah,
also temper that expectation with a reasonable understanding that it's impossible to be 100% correct
for
all of the
sure,
time,
for sure.
right?
Yeah,
And so rather than try to solve the same problem that they're already trying to solve,
yeah,
we operate through a slightly different lens, which is to focus on the post-compromise behaviors.
right,
And so what we're advocating for really is, kind of a defense in depth concept, which is
right.
keep that signature-based tooling in place, and
Yep,
where we can, we'll either support it as we did with this report, or augment it in some sort of way. But assuming for some reason that detection strategy falls short
yeah,
for a particular attack, maybe it's a 0 day, right? Maybe
yeah,
it's a scenario like this where a known vulnerability is being exploited, but the exploit is being crafted in a way that is evasive to whatever existing detection mechanisms are in place, whatever
sure,
existing signature in
sure,
place,
yeah,
right? So we're sort of operating from the expectation that that's going to happen at some point. One of
yep,
those failures
yep,
is going to
yep,
take
yeah, yeah,
place. And once the attacker gets their mitts into the environment, then we need to be able to identify the behaviors that they're engaging in that would
right,
expose their presence, right? And
right,
so that's kind of coming back to the question of how does Vectra do this differently from others?
yeah,
Um, we're really looking at the behaviors in a post-compromise scenario. So signature-based tooling tends to be more preventative in nature,
yeah,
at least detecting, if not preventing, then at least detecting the initial access point.
yeah,
And we're assuming that's going to fail. eventually. And,
Sure.
it's an
Yeah,
attacker.
because you can never get it 100%, can you? So there's always going to be a case where there's going to be an intrusion that you're going to have to deal with.
100%. And this vulnerability was a great example of that. I mean, before Barracuda released the patch for this vulnerability, it was being actively exploited in the wild. Prior to a patch being available, that sort of hits the criteria for being a 0-day kind of
Sure.
scenario, right? And so what we're doing is basically looking at, okay, assuming an attacker gets in and starts operating inside of an environment, they use some sort of 0-day exploit, for example, at the point where they start then looking to extend their reach into that environment, they're going to have to engage in behaviors within the environment that are going to stand out if you're looking for that sort of thing, which
Sure.
is challenging to look for because most times they're using normal protocol, activities or protocols at least that are normal for the
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
But they'll do it from machines that don't normally perform those actions.
Right.
They'll do it using accounts that don't normally perform those types
Right.
of
Okay.
actions.
Okay. So there are other, if you will, indicators that you can use. You put
That's
that set together, and that gives you a sort of a pattern that you can then say this is highly likely to be some sort of attack in that way,
yeah,
and then you
exactly.
can deal with that in that.
That's right.
All right.
You got it. So it's this sort of assume breach kind of mentality that I think a lot of the industry has kind of come around to, that notion that we're not going to be 100% effective from a preventative standpoint. So
Sure.
if that's the case, then how do we, if we're going to assume breach, identify, activities that an attacker is going to engage in once they are present in the environment. And there are a number of things that we can do there using AI models. Basically have the ability to identify, for example, in one of our sort of hallmark capabilities is to detect command and control traffic through HTTPS sessions.
Right.
So, assuming that it's an external adversary, they have to be controlling a machine inside of the environment in some manner. Oftentimes they'll do that using a reverse tunnel that's hidden inside of an HTTPS session. And they tend to be very effective at obscuring their command and control traffic, and that way it just
Sure.
blends in with all the rest of the encrypted traffic in the environment.
Sure.
So if you're not doing wholesale decryption of that traffic, then it's very difficult to identify their behavior. And in some cases, in a lot of cases actually, even if you are decrypting the traffic, it's still difficult to identify their behavior because they control both sides of that session, right? So they can make client communicate with their command and control server in any manner they choose, and that enables to be very evasive.
Yeah.
But there's at some level, a basic sort of communication pattern that has to happen through command and control. So you have to issue a command, you have to get the responses to that command back in order for it to be effective.
Okay.
And that's
sorry, Tom.
No, I was just going to, that's kind of the key to, this approach is, at some level that the attacker is always having to move towards an objective, and they're having to engage in activities that are going to help them achieve that.
To that objective. Yeah.
And so those are the behaviors we can define models to spot.
Okay. So obviously you've got the AI is obviously very front of mind for everybody at the moment. How in particular are you using it as a kind of an evolution from your existing approaches that you've had in the past, or is it introducing something that's really brand new for you as a if you will, a cost-effective tool that you can use in your work?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's an evolution from what has traditionally been present in the cybersecurity industry. Most vendors, at least at the point where Vectra started. So we've been at this for well over a decade now. Actually, like when we started, it was with the express purpose of leveraging AI to do cybersecurity detection. In fact, at this stage of the game, we have more patents using more AI-based patents for doing cybersecurity-based detection of threats than any other vendor on the planet, right? So we've been at
Right.
this for
Okay. So yeah. Yeah.
quite a while. But in the process of that, we've done quite a bit of innovation around how you would leverage AI for this sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that is where I think the approach that Vectra takes is pretty novel compared to what a lot of other vendors are doing. Everybody talks about AI, but
Well, there's certainly plenty of talk, isn't there?
right.
Yeah.
But how you apply it matters, and that's one of the things that we've learned and enabled us to be incredibly effective over that 10-year span. And the proof is in the pudding. We have large enterprise customers that come back and renew their contracts with us year over year because we're
Right.
consistently helping them identify the most difficult attackers
Right.
that manage to make their way into the environment. And so if we were to kind of just talk about AI for a second, I think it's an interesting conversation to have, simply because it's
Sure.
been so front and center lately
Yeah.
in the media storm, right? The hype cycle is sort of maximum generative AI
Oh
right
yes.
now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the volume's turned up to 11 at the moment, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think everybody's looking at generative AI as a new capability that they can potentially apply to some difficult problems, right? But if you take a step back and look at some of the traditional approaches of AI, you can, this isn't exhaustive by any means, but there are
Yeah.
at least three categories that you can break AI up into. One is the generative AI that seems to be like grabbing all the headlines right
Yeah,
now.
sure.
And then you've also got this like classification type of AI, which it basically is able to identify things or put them into categories, right? And then you've got more traditional anomaly detection types of
Sure.
AI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And from a cybersecurity standpoint, the primary type of AI that was applied across most vendors is kind of that anomaly detection
Sure.
based AI. So
Yeah,
we,
yeah,
we
yeah.
saw something different.
Yeah.
Let's elevate that and get some attention or eyes on it, right? The problem with that is work tends to not be static, right? Like
No.
there's a lot of variability in people's
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
right? Like you and I didn't do this interview yesterday, and while it's a pleasure, we're probably to speak with you, we're probably not going to do this interview again tomorrow, right? Like we're not living Groundhog Day.
No,
And
indeed.
so
No. Yeah, for sure.
naturally that the data that's present, that's being collected in these environments, is going to reflect that variability, and
Yeah,
the impact of that on anomaly detection models is that they tend to be very voluminous in terms of the number of alerts that they generate, right?
yeah.
And so, some of the early attempts to do, cybersecurity, threat detection through anomaly-based models kind of gave AI a bad rap, right?
Oh, right.
Um,
Okay.
and so people, had this, impression that like, oh yeah, there's a lot of talk in AI and machine learning and whatever else with respect to cybersecurity, but it just doesn't hold up to, all the
Right. So
promises.
they didn't deliver on the hype, as it were, basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But if you kind of take this from a much more academic approach and think like, okay, well, you can't necessarily just take one class or one type of AI and apply it to all problems.
Indeed.
You know,
Yeah.
let's get a little bit more thoughtful about this and
Yeah.
see if there are maybe different types of AI that we can apply in different ways to
For sure.
be effective. And that was one of the primary breakthroughs that Vectra had as a research team. We've sort of realized that, hey, you know what, we can combine things like classification models and anomaly detection models and start
Right.
to really increase the fidelity, turn up the effectiveness of these things. And so, the way we went about that is to say, like, yeah, there are definitely some instances where anomalies that are taking place in the environment are of particular interest. But we found that where they are of particular interest is when those anomalies tend to be classified as something that we know, like some kind of activity we know
I
will
see. Yeah.
further an attacker's
Yeah,
objective.
yeah. So yeah,
And
okay.
so
Well,
we
you're matching
really see,
two sets of information coming together, and you get something 2 plus 2 is 5 kind of thing from that
yeah,
analysis. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
The sum is greater than the whole of the parts, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah,
you have basically this notion that we've got these massive data sets where we can train a model and say, okay, this is what bad looks like,
yeah,
behavioral standpoint. This is what good looks like from a behavioral standpoint. And a lot of times, just out of that, when we see behaviors in the environment, it doesn't matter what tool the attacker is using to initiate that behavior. What's
sure.
important is the behavior that follows, right? And
Yeah,
so we can see that, and just straight away from the behavioral based classification know that, like, okay, this is suspicious, right?
yeah,
Then if you're in some instances, you can take that a step further and say, okay, well, is this thing that's potentially bad also unusual in the
yeah,
environment? And so it's where some unsupervised learning that does that anomaly detection sort of stuff can be merged with your classification of known bad stuff to be able to really turn up the dial in terms of reducing the number of occurrences that are going to
yeah,
be false positive, right?
yeah,
So
for sure.
that's one of the significant advantages that this approach can bring.
All
Now
right.
that
Yeah, that's a key point, I think, isn't it? Is that you cannot afford to be spending your time concerned with things that are not ultimately going to be difficult, as it were.
it's exactly it. And when you look at the problem, from a cybersecurity standpoint, there's already too much data.
Yeah, for
that
sure, for sure.
the solution over the years has always been more, right? Like the
Yeah,
solution to, and because it's a cat and mouse game, right? Where
yeah,
some attacker devises a new approach to
yeah,
target a particular environment or an attack surface. And then, the solution to that is we're going to devise some new technology to be able to detect that activity,
sure.
or some new rules, a rule set. So the point is that there's always some additive response
Yeah,
to the threat landscape evolving, right?
yeah,
And when you already are dealing with something that has a massive amount of information, massive amount of required knowledge and expertise, and then you just
yeah,
keep piling more
yeah.
onto that.
It becomes completely unmanageable, doesn't it?
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. The burden of more, as we like to talk about here, just
Yeah,
grows out of control, right? And so if you can, attack that from a different perspective and say, we're going to bring down that level of noise
yeah,
and focus on high fidelity attack signal,
yeah.
then we can really constrain what a security team has to spend their time doing,
Right.
right?
Okay. Okay. Great stuff. So, hey Tom, so just thinking about business, I guess, and a marketplace here. Are there any particular types of firms that are particularly that you particularly target with your solution? Any characteristics of their businesses or issues that they have within their business? Are they in media where they're dealing with a lot of signals from the outside world? Are they in finance when they have to be particularly concerned with, personal management of personal information or security, financial transactions? Where's your strong suit, as it were? Do you think?
Yeah, so we tend to operate across the board in the enterprise across a plethora of industries. We have finance customers, we have healthcare customers, we have manufacturing customers. It's in particular those organizations that really have multiple attack surfaces that they have to manage. So if you take, for example, a hospital in particular, they're
Yeah,
never not going to have an on-prem network. They
sure,
they just have to, right? There's no way
sure.
that they're ever going to be able to get away from that. But that doesn't mean that they can't also embrace the cloud in some manner,
For
right?
sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll give you an example of some work that I did for the actually for the COVID app here. And there was some migration of applications across the health service in New South Wales, where some of those applications were going to public cloud. And
Mhm.
to your point about these different hybrid ecosystems, that was a significant issue for them because some of those applications they had no choice but to go to public cloud because the application provider was no longer supporting on-prem provision.
I got
So
exactly.
they were forced into this situation where they had to deal with these different infrastructures, and it wasn't really a positive decision that they were able to take. To your point of healthcare, that they were sort of constrained into it, and that
Yeah,
presented particular challenges.
right. And there are other on the other end of that spectrum, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to manage identity and productivity suites on-prem anymore. To
Yeah,
have your own on-prem mail suite, for example, like it just doesn't make any sense at all,
yeah,
especially with the degree of exposure that comes with that, and the vulnerability management that has to be done on something that's really mission critical. People have
yeah,
to have email, they have to have messaging, right, to
I
get
do.
work done these days. And so it just sort of naturally makes sense for people to migrate that kind of workload to the cloud, right? And so
Sure.
that's been pervasive over the last, I'd say, 5 years. We've almost every organization I've interfaced with is using some kind of cloud productivity suite provider like
Sure.
Microsoft
I could,
365
yeah,
is
for sure.
the common one, right? And but as you do that, now your attack surface gets more complicated. And from a cybersecurity standpoint, you can think of it this way: the the move from on-prem to the cloud sort of it puts a new burden on the cybersecurity team
It
because
does.
they've had something that they've learned to manage for quite a long time,
Yeah,
in terms of what types of alerts does the on-prem stuff generate, what types of things do we need to investigate, how do we respond to those things. And the moment you move to the cloud, that all changes because it's not a lift and shift transition. The log data that's being generated by
absolutely.
M365 fundamentally different from the log data that comes from your on-prem Exchange server, for example, right?
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so whatever rules you had in place to deal with your on-prem Exchange logs, all that goes out the window,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
whatever processes that went along with those rules, they all have to be redefined, rewritten, et
Yeah.
cetera. And so that's where we're seeing, that transition consistently is creating challenges for teams. As I said in the beginning, the ability to derive high value attack signal from that stuff is really, really challenging. So, any organization that's in route of that kind of migration really going to get substantial benefit from the AI capabilities that we bring to bear. We basically roll out an M365 solution for our customers that has pre-built models that already understand what the difference between good and bad is,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
that's not a bunch of unsupervised learning mechanisms in there that then apply those classification models in a very learned and a way that's unique to your organization,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Okay, so we I guess we've got to wrap up, but that's a really interesting point to conclude with there because what we can identify is that point of transition, as you say, from what a situation where for a business where they're looking, if you will, a cybersecurity team has got almost a very in-depth and particular knowledge of the systems that they've been dealing with on-prem, and all of a sudden they're faced with new environments with which over they have less control and less familiarity, if you want.
right.
And they suddenly got to produce a coherent package out of those solutions covered by their cybersecurity regime, as it were. So
Yeah,
that's a huge challenge with which you can assist, I guess.
it is. And I think you just sort of subtly hit the nail on the head there, is that like just because you have less control and maybe less knowledge or less expertise doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of keeping the
Absolutely.
environment secure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there's every one of these cloud providers. If you're already in the cloud or moving to it, you should be looking at the shared responsibility model that's defined for the various cloud providers that you're working with.
Yeah.
Because there's this sort of notion that we move to the cloud, they handle the security of it. And that's true to a degree. But you'll notice if you look at, sort of the breakdown of the shared responsibility model from a cybersecurity standpoint with these cloud vendors, you'll find that that responsibility is sort of sliced in half, but it's more like
Yeah.
40% to the vendor, 60% to the
Yeah, for
customer.
sure. Yeah.
They use
Everybody's
it
looking for somebody to talk to about a problem. They don't really care whether it's the cloud man or the this, that man. And the cybersecurity team is going to be the front door to deal with those particular problems, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And the notion of shared, like they use that term pretty loosely, right?
Yeah,
The
for sure.
vendors.
Yes, that's right. Okay, yeah.
So more of the burden falls on their customer than does on the well, I mean, I say that in terms of like, you're still responsible for, your credentials getting exposed and then those accounts being abused as a result. Like the vendor has a tough time doing anything about that. They
Oh, for
don't necessarily,
sure, for sure.
and so that's going to be on you, and that applies across the board, whether we're talking about M365 or AWS or Google Cloud. The conversation is the same with every single one of these, Azure, and so you take that and combine it with kind of the problem with respect to the network. The network is still traditionally a very good point of entry for an attacker.
Yeah,
And then use that and pivot to the cloud, and vice versa. They can start, through identity and find a way to, work into the network from there. Maybe that identity allows them VPN access into the on-prem network, right? And then they, so that there's just so many different angles that this hybrid attack scenario really creates a problem. And then the other thing I'd say, I mean, just to tie a bow on this, generally large enterprises are going to have a problem of, just a massive volume of data to try to deal with.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's definitely something that we excel at. You can really take that classification and anomaly detection type of AI and all of the, sort of mature unsupervised learning that we do, all the mature classification that we can do. We can do that at massive scale. So one of the things that's great about AI is we can build profiles of hundreds of thousands of entities in an environment, whether they're, hosts or accounts, user accounts.
yeah,
We can identify, what this entity is in terms of based on how it behaves. Is it a
yeah,
privileged account?
yeah,
Is it an administrator's host or machine workstation, right, that they're
yeah,
operating from? Is it a file server? Is it a domain controller? We can build all these profiles automatically
yeah.
with AI that you would have a really, really tough time building out manually.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think actually I have to say that across maybe the last 6 months, when one hears behind the hype of the AI, this organization of very large bodies of knowledge, huge volumes of data, is something where that you can see that there may be some actual practical application because there's no other way of doing it. The volumes are
that's
just so huge and so well, just so it's just a matter of quantity. And
yeah,
AI is the only way, possibly the tooling that we have available to us that enables to try and make sense of this and create it into some sort of manageable, as I say, body of knowledge. And then
yeah,
that's what
100%.
interested me about this trying to handle these patterns of data that are flowing through, organizations in enormous volumes is how
Yeah,
you
and
actually try to understand that so you can control it and manage it.
right. And one of the reasons it's such a challenge is because of the unstructured nature of the
Yeah,
data, right?
sure.
So, you're going to be dealing with data from lots of different sources,
Sure.
and data from your on-prem network is going to look different from your identity cloud, which is going to look different from your cloud infrastructure provider, right? Your cloud
Sure.
service provider, right? So each one of these, and within each of those providers, they tend to have, multiple sources where, each data delivered is again going to be different, right? And so there's a massive amount of it. And it's really interesting. Generally, when you're talking about big data, you're talking about high volume unstructured data is
Sure.
literally what
Yeah,
is
exactly.
classified as big data. It's got to be, it's really the unstructured nature of it. But in cybersecurity, we're dealing with a big data times 365 kind of problem,
Sure.
right? Because
Sure.
every day is a new
It's a
data lake,
new set of data, isn't it?
right?
Yeah,
It's
for
it's
sure.
a new massive volume of data. Yeah. And in some large enterprises, it's a new big data problem every hour,
For
because
sure.
like they're generating such large volumes. And when it's unstructured in nature like that, it becomes very, very challenging to find some value out of that data. And AI can really, simplify that process for you, right? So that's another significant component of it. And that just really enables us to kind of relieve the burden for a lot of it would be, security operations center or incident response team, any kind of incident
Right.
investigator.
Right.
These
Okay.
folks are trying to figure out what are the things that I really ought to pay attention to. And so, like I said, we can build these profiles of, hundreds of thousands of hosts. And, over the course of a day or the course of a week, we can say, hey, out of these hundreds of thousands of machines, here, 10 this week that are really doing some unusual stuff that you need to focus your attention into. And then we changed that really fundamentally changes the nature of the work for the analyst or the investigator, because now they're not looking at discrete events. They're looking at sort of a portfolio of
Right.
behaviors.
Behaviors. Okay. All right.
And they can see really the big picture, and that's, I think, aside from Vectra, I think as a cybersecurity, sort of community, it's much more how we need to be thinking, and more of a holistic picture of, entities, as opposed to, operating on an alert by alert basis, which is
Okay. Which is a completely different way of thinking now.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Tom. Well, look, I think we probably have to wrap up now. I'd like to thank you for a really interesting conversation. I think, and it was a great paper that took from a very specific example of the way in which work is performed now. And that led to, I think, to a very, general and all-encompassing conversation about both your firm and the work that you're doing, and the benefits that you can deliver to your customers. So I really appreciate the time that you've taken. I may be in the middle of the night where you are. I'm not quite sure.
No,
But,
no.
we're
It's
delighted
my
to be able
pleasure,
to
Garrett.
talk to you.
Yeah, anytime. It's my pleasure. We appreciate you having us. Thank you very much.